Welcome to Uncorked and Unscripted, the podcast and video series that gives you VIP access to the unscripted stories of people I've met through events. In this episode of Uncorked and Unscripted, Gian Paul Gonzalez, motivational speaker and chaplain of the New York Giants, joins us to discuss his work in juvenile detention centers, life on the road as a speaker, and how he inspired the New York Giants to be all in to win the 2012 Super Bowl. Now uncork your favorite beverage and listen up as we spend the next half hour, plus maybe a few more minutes, unscripted. Hi there, welcome back to Uncorked and Unscripted. I'm your host, Addie Graham Kramer, founder and CEO of the event company. Today we have a celebrity with us, I will say. We've had the opportunity to work with so many incredible speakers all across the world over the years. And one of them that comes to mind always when we're in incredible conversations about not only motivation, but kind of dialing back to your roots is Gian Paul Gonzalez. So welcome.
Pleasure to be here, Addie. Thanks so much.
It's fun to have kind of the stage kind of twisted a little bit. You're usually right on stage and talking to everybody. Now I have the chance to be able to interview you, so I'm kind of excited for this piece of it. But for those of you, I mean, you have a pretty extensive resume, but for those that don't know, I'm just going to share just a little bit about you, but I want you to kind of dive in a little bit more. But from my side, I mean, you are not only a motivational speaker, you have been kind of coined with helping the New York Giants win a Super Bowl in the past, but you're also an executive director of a foundation. You are impacting millions of lives really all over the world. So dive in just a little bit for us and just share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll kind of dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I mean, thanks so much for the introduction. Yeah. I think if I could kind of boil it into one thing is just I enjoy serving. I enjoy serving, and so titles can mean so much, but at the same time, at the end of the day, if it's not impacting someone else's life in a positive way, if it's not serving them, then it's, at least from my perspective, what's the point? And so I think whether it's work that's done in the juvenile detention centers that we're involved with, mitigating risk issues with different communities and students we're working with, to being a father, being a husband, working with the Giants, traveling with them for all the home and away games. I think at the end of the day, it's really always just checking yourself at the door, whether it's the door of my house or the door of the Giants training facility, or before the curtain before going on stage. It's just saying, "Hey, am I here to serve?" And really, really making sure you come to grips with that. And at least for me, I think it puts myself in the right headspace, knowing that there to be a servant instead of to be served. And I think that's where I find a lot of purpose.
Yeah, and you've had an incredible past as well, being a high school history teacher as well. And from professor, I mean, you're serving a lot of different roles over these years. And we're going to talk more about what that looks like today. I'm excited for people to hear more about your story. But before we do that, one of the questions that we always ask every single guest is, because we're uncorked and unscripted, the unscripted piece is the fun part, right? Kind of diving in and finding out your shoe size and what you eat for breakfast and all the fun stuff. But from the uncork side, if you were to be a drink, like if people were to describe you as a drink of choice, what would that be?
Wow, that's a great question.
Yeah,
that's a great question. I would say, well, I've never thought about that.
I know. It's a fun one.
That's a good one. I think just because I enjoy coffee so much, I would like to say, I'd like to say an oat milk cortado.
Oh, good.
There we go.
Good
not too much milk, not too much espresso, just like a little bit in between. But
and
oat
milk.
And oat milk.
Awesome.
Not maybe because lactose is a little hard on me. I'll just throw it out there. But
I get it.
A little alternative, but just try to. Yeah, I think that would work.
I love it. Well, it's a good pick me up too, and anybody can make one. I feel like, right?
Yeah. I think.
I mean, have you had some bad cortados over the years?
I'll be a coffee snob, during the height of everything that happened in 2020, as a way to kind of help the family make ends meet when there wasn't after school programming that I normally would be involved with. I got certified as a barista and started working in an Australian barista shop in Manhattan. Yeah. So I would say yes, but then at the same time, having learned the art and science of it, anyone can make one, whether it
good.
tastes good or not. That's something else. But I'll go with you. Anyone can make them. There we
Skill
go.
set that nobody knows. I did not see that on any resume, YouTube. I don't think ESPN's talked about this piece of it. So
Nope.
we're here breaking it first. Well, awesome. Well, I want to know, so how I came to know you, obviously through the events piece of it, but I think what, from my side, is really the New York Giants piece. And I'm sure that was kind of just such an eye-opening piece for you. But take us back maybe prior to you getting that phone call with the Giants and what that looked like for you, where you were at in your life and family, all those pieces. Just take us back then.
Yeah, I just, long story short, went to high school, thought I was going to play football like my dad. He was a very good football player when he immigrated from Havana, Cuba. And so he played in college and then had a short opportunity playing with the Oakland Raiders. I thought I was going to play football.
Huh.
My idol growing up was Dan Marino, quarterback of the Dolphins. But, plans change. And so I switched to basketball and, it took a lot of hard work. I'm not going to say it was easy, but it took a lot of hard work. Never had played organized till I was 16 years old. But really worked hard at it. And thankfully, was blessed in the aspiration of it, was able to play in college, but a small Division III college. The rest of my teammates, they went like Division I and stuff. And, I think it was overcoming some hurdles with that, and just saying, wow, why am I playing at a higher level, et cetera. But just being content saying, hey, if I'm Division III, doesn't mean I can't practice like Division I. Let me give my best, wake up every day at 5 a.m., et cetera. And then from there, got the opportunity senior year as an All-American. Was averaging like a little under 30 points a game. So it got on the radar with a couple of scouts and got an opportunity to play over in the NBA Summer League over in Los Angeles.
Good for you. What position were you playing?
Well, in college, I was a power forward, but obviously I was the smallest guy on the team when I got to Los Angeles. So I had to adapt to shooting guard, which was a hard adaptation, but you got to do what you got to do. And it was from there that I kind of, things kind of went in a different direction than I had planned. Before I went out there, I had really saw that sports could be used for something greater. I felt that, when I would think about it and feel I was blessed with these talents for a reason. And so before going out there, though, I was able to go with one or two other teammates from other teams in the conference. And we had gone to a juvenile detention center and played a basketball game, not against, but with some of the young men and women who were in there. And I, honestly speaking, I loved the experience. I loved being able to communicate to them hope and love. But, obviously you walk in a room and you say, hey, I want to tell you something. It's very difficult to communicate, and have others communicate back to you. But I just started to love the ability for athletics and how that can build. At the end of the day, it's a bridge. It's a bridge. It's more than a hobby in pretty much most cultures around the world. You look at the effect of the World Cup, teams, and you're able to connect and communicate in a way you can't normally do within 5 minutes with anything else. And so I just really loved and I started to see this could be a bridge that could really impact the lives of not just adults, but young men and young women that have been through some difficult things. And so I did that, went out to Los Angeles, and that was always in the back of my head. And so when it came decision time, was I going to, sign a contract, continue with the professional route? Honestly, I was thinking about it, was praying about it, and said, I really want to go back and continue the work that I was doing. And so it started, went back, started in the juvenile detention centers, working in there, going regularly, using this model we had built, using sports and athletics as a way to kind of break down the walls and get to some of the root issues of what was happening in these individuals' lives and how we can get them on a better path. And then from there, I said, we're kids, 8 hours a day, they're in school. So let's be a teacher. And so put the social studies degree to good use and had to go the alternate route because I didn't have a teacher's certificate. And so started teaching 9th grade world history.
Wow, incredible.
And so that was really,
eye-opening, I'm sure.
Eye-opening, just really, because at the end of the day, you're not teaching, it's not about the content. It's about the care, right? It's once kids know that you care about them, they'll care about the content. It's really sneak. Even if you stop in for 5 minutes, the JV volleyball game, even if they're 1 and 18, the kid that's in your class who sees you stop in and you lock eyes for 5 seconds, it changes everything completely because they know you care about them as a person, not just as a grade. And so really loved doing that. And it was around that time that was my third year teaching, where the Giants got the call from the Giants asking if I would speak to the team.
And you were friends with the chaplain at that time, if I remember right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He had heard about, some of the stuff we were doing. And so we had made like some connections, just like, he was like, oh, what you're doing is cool. Would love to take my players and maybe they could collaborate with some of the stuff you're doing in the jails and different things of that nature. But it still was a bit of a surprise, honestly, because I never played football, right? Like, what do I have? How could I possibly communicate with them, in that sense? Because I'd always use it through basketball, right? And through, okay, well, if I play the sport, then I have a right to speak into someone's life if we're playing it together. And I was a bit surprised, these guys, they're Eli Manning in the front row, guys like that. Like, how am I going to relate to them in the span of 18 minutes? Because he's like, hey, listen, you only have 18 minutes. Yeah. And, Coach Coughlin was very precise about time. He's like, you should probably finish early. Like, keep it tight. And so, that's how it kind of came about, is the phone call from him. And then, just saying, all right, yeah, sure. I'll give it a shot.
I remember watching interviews of you, and I mentioned this to you offline, but you just looked like a young kiddo just out there, and I guess 3 years into teaching, I mean, I think you have such, and for me, you seem just like a positive person every time that we're around you, or just see all that you're doing. And that I think is exuded in a lot of things that you do. But I can't even imagine getting that phone call and the opportunity that's in front of you to be nervous and scared and maybe indecisive, but praying for the way to be able to communicate to these men. I mean, you were put there for a purpose. And do you feel like you were already living all in at that point in time? Or were you just still, the reason why I say that is sometimes I feel like we try to at a lot of points in our lives, but there's always these books, and open up this book and chapters are closing here and there. And sometimes you're not all in, but do you feel like you were all in at that point in time? Or was that for you more of an eye-opening piece?
Yeah. It's great you say that, Eddie, just because I think, and I, by God's grace, and I'm thankful for it, I had begun to practice it, and I think that's something I say when I get a chance to share in different venues is, I always feel being all in starts with our hand way before it should come out of our mouth.
Sure.
It's something we exemplify because, especially working with students, character is not something they can read in a book. It's something that they watch, something that they see modeled. And so, you learn that very quickly. I think, going into juvenile detention centers, you got to know why you're there. Mm-hmm. You can't be there just because, I got to do community service hours, because you're not going to come back. Right. Just being like, it's inconvenient. It's, you can't even stop in. You go there, you give your driver's license. You have to wait 15 minutes just to get through all the doors that close behind you and the next one that closes. Like it's not, you don't stop by like it's a drive-through. It takes a while just to get into a place where you can interact with the different individuals that are there. And then plus then getting out takes just as much time. And then, just honestly speaking, first time we went, I remember, I wouldn't say hostile, but I think there was a degree of distrust, like, man, why are you here, man?
What are you getting into?
Like, F you, like, well, like, I don't need your help, et cetera. Yeah. But I think there's something powerful. And that's what I say about being all in. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. Mm-hmm. There's something powerful that I think all of us really gravitate towards. We need stuff to count on. We need the person to be there when they said they were going to be there, and then they've got to be perfect at what they do when they're there. It's just they said they're going to be there and they're going to try and they're going to give a maximum effort. And so, honestly, that's something that, I think I had the opportunity to live both, in work in the juvenile detention centers to in the classroom. I mean, when people ask, how do I get better at speaking? I'm like, teach, be a substitute teacher. You're literally on stage, 8 shows a day for 45 minutes each against the hardest crowd. Doesn't matter what district you go to. You go to suburban, rural, low income, high income. If you don't get their attention in the first 60 seconds, you don't have it for the next 44 minutes. So it's one of those things that what works right away, what doesn't work right away. And it's also, they also know if you don't want to be there. And so it really helps you be fine-tuned to your audience, if you will, and really try to say, hey, how can I, bring them in, but then at the same time, make them, teach them how to think, not what to think, but how to think and how to be, how to become greater. And so I would say those things combined, when I did get the opportunity to speak to the Giants, initially I did try to treat it like a classroom. This is just a classroom. Yeah. Just these students have more money in their bank account, right? And there's some of them are
just
bigger,
right in front of me.
Yeah.
But Coach Coughlin, all the things. Yeah.
Yeah. working with the team for the past 8 years is I'll bring in guest speakers, much like I was brought in now as my role as chaplain of the team. And it's interesting. It doesn't matter who I bring in. They still freeze a little bit. That first couple of minutes is still awkward. I don't care who I bring in, like, and some of them are like speakers. And I was like, it's different when you're in a ballroom and you're a foot away from this guy or 2 feet. And and the cool part is these guys are locked in. They don't have to be in the room. It's a chapel service. They're choosing to be there. And they're attentive to you the way they're attentive to the offensive coordinator. It's
incredible.
And so they want to, all right, does this guy know what he's saying?
Yeah.
Does he believe what he's saying?
And the trust factor.
Yeah.
So did you have an educator that influenced you at a young age? I know I can think of a couple in my life. And I think it's so impactful how when you talk about you're there for the trust piece of it. Like you just talked about, like going into the volleyball game, whatever it looks like. I always talk about whatever happens outside of the four walls is what builds that trust and what breaks down those barriers. You talk about it even being on the basketball court. You could be the richest one in there, or you could be in low income housing. It doesn't matter because you're all in the same jersey, right? Like nobody knows. So it's the same thing on the court. But was there someone in your life that you can pinpoint from an educator's perspective that drove you kind of into that path that you can recall?
Yeah. I mean, I was blessed with a bunch of different ones at different stages.
Sure.
And I think, a couple that come to mind, Mr. Phillips, who was my world history teacher. It's funny how that works out. But he was one of those guys, I think it's to your point about the trust factor. It's really about individuals that really recognize you for the other things you do. Like you said, celebrating. I think, just in general in the society, we're so poor at celebrating. We always think, well, if I say congratulations to them, that means I'm losing somehow. Like we just need to get way better at celebrating each other and their accomplishments. And when someone has a good day or a good win, it doesn't take away from our wins, but that's a subject for another day. But I think it was individuals who would be like, hey class, before we start class, I want to congratulate Gian Paul. He's on the basketball team, blah, blah, blah. They won this. And it was simple. It took all 10 seconds, but when you're 16,
someone cares.
It's like, wow. Yeah, cool. Like I put a lot of work and a lot of effort into this. And sometimes, teachers as well as students in a lot of school districts, they can feel like ghosts. They can feel like, does anyone really know what I do or what I'm trying to help? Especially if you're not getting super success, you're not, LeBron James right away, which, a lot, 99% of the population isn't. And so just those little acknowledgments can go a long way. I remember even my Spanish teacher, he was a funny guy and he actually was like, oh, I'm going to play you in one-on-one. And he actually brought his sneakers and he played me one-on-one in my sophomore year in high school. And I remember his name was Mr. Kirsch. But it was something as simple as like, hey, I care about what you care about, and, find a point of relation, a point of connection. And that's something I'm always big on telling, new teachers when they come into the classroom is find a way to connect. You don't got to be an expert on it. And they're like, oh, I'm busy. I was like, if the kids are into Pokemon, learn one Pokemon. Right. Like that, it's just simple, but you saying it, they're gonna be like, oh, you don't need to know everything about it. And, but they'll find me out. I'm like, no, it's just the fact that you're taking time to acknowledge what they're into. And, something that's small, innocuous, of course, you don't got to get into anything that's like, rude or pervasive, but just, it shows and they know it and they see it.
Try to stay up on the lingo with kids these days. So I have a 14-year-old and 11-year-old, and I don't even know some of the things that they say with skibbity and Ohio. And I'm like,
Skibbity,
I try
Ohio.
to just stay hip and relevant just so they feel like, wow, mom really cares or she knows. But it's not like you can't say it's lit anymore. Like that's not cool. Like there's too many things out there. But I agree with you on the connecting point. And I think, so in our industry, whenever we're bringing new individuals into our company from a team member's perspective, we always talk about a servant heart. And similar to like what you do, we are in the hospitality industry, and whether it is the best day and everything's going A-okay, or stuff is truly on fire in the back of the ballroom that nobody knows about, those are pieces that we have to do day in and day out. So everybody on our team has such a servant heart for what we do. We want to serve. That's all we want to do. We want to have happy faces. We want to unite people together, all for whatever it happens to be. And that servant heart, though, is something that is not trainable, in my eyes anyway. I think you either have it or you don't, or it's on the brink there, right? Where you just need one person, like what you're saying, that one person to be able to impact a life, to say, wow, they really cared about me. And now look at you, where you're at in your role and the people that you're bringing in to speak now in front of the team. Like the one person or the couple of people, the Spanish teacher playing basketball with you, and now to where you're at, like you're part of this circle, right? And I think that's the impactful piece that some of us forget. Whether you're greeting somebody on the street corner, could be having the worst day of their life, somebody could have passed away and you have no idea, but it's those little impactful moments that are making a difference. And for you, you're making a big difference in thousands and millions of lives on a big stage, day in and day out, or you're doing it at home with your kids, So that's the fun part about you. So congrats to you and all that you've experienced over these years.
No, thanks, Eddie. And to your point about what you said just at the end, I think it's so important. A book that's really important to me is the Bible. And there's, just very briefly, there's a verse that I never totally understood, but I'm starting to get more of it. And you hit on it at the end. There's this one quote by Jesus where he says, "A prophet is without honor in his hometown." And before I was like, oh, that means, every time I go back to Union City, people are going to be like, it's just that, Mr. Gonzalez guy again, whatever, all in. But what I started to find out is without the applause when you go back home, it really, and if you are still able to give your best, you're still able to be all in, and you become addicted to purpose and not to applause anymore. And I think that's something that's so important, and why I begin to really enjoy that verse is because once you're addicted to the purpose part, exactly. And you could care less if someone's clapping for it or not, then you'll do it, like you said, no matter what stage. And the opportunities that happen, it's like Erwin McManus, he has this great quote. He says, when we abdicate when we abdicate our responsibilities, we eliminate our opportunities. And I think that's so true, because our biggest, and you can speak to it as someone who's highly successful in your field, the biggest breaks came usually when you thought nobody was watching, when you were giving your absolute, best, to, maybe it was a smaller, venue, maybe it was not as grand as X, but someone was there who was related to there. And before you know it, you're getting a call to go here or go there. I'll follow your guys' Instagram too. And it's like, wow, but it came because that person experienced 7-star treatment in this little thing. And so they recommended but a lot of times, students I work with, they're like, oh, well, I'll be all in once I get to this level, or I'll turn it on once I get here. Yeah. And it's like, it's got to be in the little things. It's got to be what you do at home when no one's going to clap for you, when no one's going to give you an applause for loading the dishwasher, right? Like it's those little, is that voice in your head that's like, no, you could finish that before you go to bed. No, you should do that. With players I work with, it says three sets of 12, but you could do 14.
And I'm sure you see it. Like, we coach both of our boys. So both our boys are basketball and football, and we coach both of them. We're not like those loud parent coaches, but I am a rah-rah. I'm a cheer on the sidelines for sure. But we do talk about body language and what it looks like. And when you talk about the all-in piece, you're all in whether you're losing or not. And it doesn't matter about college recruiters or who's watching or who's doing things, because it's all happening all at the same time. And it doesn't matter if you're 5 years old or 15 or 25 or whatever. And so we talk a lot about that. We actually had some tournaments this last weekend, and we're discussing that with both of them. And it truly, truly matters, both on court, off the court, in life, at home, like all of what you're saying. But for one little piece that I want to ask, like, for all in, when you talk about that, I have seen it. Again, we follow each other on socials. Like, you've got people making signs, they're making t-shirts, they're doing all these things. For you though, like, simple breakdown, what does that mean to you? What does all in mean to you personally?
It's being a servant right where you're put, giving your absolute, and it's doing, one of the, once again, going back to, the Bible, which is really important to me, there's a verse in there that says, when you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to the greatest. And so for me, all in is it's being the same person. And I know it's cliche, but people aren't, unfortunately, people aren't, like, you travel with some individuals, you see how they treat the person who just told them their flight is delayed 2 hours, or how they treat the person who's going to make sure, they get on stage and they get to, get a great financial commitment. Sometimes that can be totally different. And I know it's hard. I know it's frustrating when we get disappointed by bad news or things that interfere with our schedule and our checklist. But for me, being all in is, hey, I have this opportunity right here. And it might be small, it might be insignificant, but let me give it my best. Is something, when we started this basketball thing, going to the jails, right? We started finding out that we needed to change the atmosphere. I think changing the atmosphere, I mean, you know about changing atmospheres, you do such amazing events. It's so key. And so I was like, how can we change the atmosphere? Okay, we can't change the paint on the walls. We can't do a lot of stuff in the facilities themselves. You know what we can do? We could bring jerseys, get them out of their jumpsuits and get them in jerseys. But we couldn't afford the jerseys at first. So what I would do, but it's the little things. I would go to the, where I live in New Jersey, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I'm not sure if you remember when big white t-shirts were really cool.
Yeah, of course.
So the hip hop community. Okay. Exactly. And you wear 2 or 3 of them to look bigger than you were. Anyway, I would get white t-shirts, and I found out if we can't buy jerseys yet because we didn't have the funding from the detention center and stuff.
I found out I was just going to say you probably did iron-on transfers. So, I figured, iron.
Yes. So we would iron on our front, and then some people would say, okay, you're done. And I'd be like, no, you know what? It means a lot when you have a number on your back. You feel like you're a part of something. Maybe it's your favorite number. Maybe it's just a number though, because that means you're part of the squad. You get a number. And so it took a lot to use the inkjet printer and, print it out. And then you have to press hard with the iron, and you're using, because it didn't have the heat press or all that stuff, just pressing hard up till 2, 3 a.m. But you know what? Then all of a sudden, 8 years later, when we're able to buy jerseys from Nike, right? When we're able to have jerseys donated from a big organization, it's still, you know what? But that only happened because we were willing to iron on jerseys in my basement at 2 a.m. in the morning because we were going to the detention center the next day. Because when the kids saw the shirts and they're like, what? I want to be number 7. I want to be number 8. And the kid got to be a kid again. He didn't have to think he was a ward of the state. He didn't have to think he was, about his trial date coming up. For that 30 minutes, he got to be a player, and he got to put on a shirt. And, I think it's for me, that's what all in means. It's, okay, great. We get a little opportunity. Is there a way we can make it better? And do I take the opportunity to make it better? Or do I say, you know what, I'll make it better when I get X, or if I can make it just a little bit better now, right? Let me do it for somebody else, not for myself, but to serve somebody else. And I think that's for me what it looks like.
Were you using that word all in prior to the Giants that night? Yeah. Cause this was right before, right? It was was it New Year's Eve? If I'm trying to remember, right? Was it a New? Yeah. Yeah, so you weren't using it.
Right before. For
those that don't know this little bit of your story, so I don't want to tell the whole thing, but talk to us about the poker chips and how it all happened in there. Were you jangling the poker chips a little nervous trying to get in there?
So honestly with you, I had, and this, like I said, I'd never played poker before. So when people are like, oh, you're probably a big poker player. So, no, being a teacher in the classroom, I really gravitated towards appealing to all learning styles, which means you couldn't just be visual. You had to be, tactile. You had to be auditory, right? To get all my students engaged in the classroom. And so I'm always looking for a point of connection. And so I said, what's something I could use that could help everybody understand what we're talking about when we talk about commitment, right? And so, like I said, it was a chapel service, but it was a chapel service the night before Christmas Eve. So obviously, everybody comes, right? And so that it was just okay, how can I convey this principle of commitment, in a way that everybody's going to get, or at least has an emotional connection to? And, I said, poker chip, when you go all in per se, you're willing to risk it. Yes, you could go buy more chips at the cashier, but there's a risk there. You're not sure if it's going to work out. You're not, you're done just bleeding chips, hoping for a lucky hand. You're done just waiting there for somebody else. And so that's what I tried to convey to them is just, And also I'm big on physical representations. I'm kind of that guy. So, I said, hey guys, you might not get with what Joseph was going through, staying committed to Mary in this story, from the scripture. But, if you've ever played, asked, who played poker, everybody raised their hand. And I was like, all right, that moment when you go all in, yes, you could have more financial liability or more comfort than the other person, but there's still a rush. There's still an idea that, hey, this is a risk. And so I said, when you push them in, you're hoping that the cards work out. But in this instance, I want to give you guys a chip, and I want you to sign it because things don't mean a whole lot until you sign them. And you take the chip and you bring it with you. So instead of betting on something, hopefully something happens, you're quote unquote betting on yourself and something you can control, not the next guy, because you can't control what he's going to do next to you or the team's going to do, or, it's you. And so I said, take the chip, sign it, put it someplace you see it. And then you ask yourself the question, when you see the chip, did I give my best? That's all, because you can fool coaches, you could fool, your significant other, whatever, but right? The same way, when you're on the bench press and you could have done more, but you didn't, you left it there because, whatever. And so that was the kind of start of it, of just, what does that look like? And honestly, I didn't refer to football. I referred to them more as in the community, as husbands, as fathers, what is that? Because I'm a big proponent. It's from the inside out. Like if you're choosing to be all in, for your family, it's going to naturally bleed into your profession. It'll bleed into what you do every day. I haven't seen the other work as well in a positive way. That's just me. Yeah. When someone's like, "Oh, I'm just going to be all in for football and nothing else." It's a
spiral. It can be a spiral.
I don't think that works well.
Yeah.
Yes. Or it can be so temporary. Of okay, we're all in for this new sales initiative. Yes, we helped profits increase by 20%, but then it'll go away because it was just in one area. And so I'm a big proponent. The saying, it's not a slogan, it's a lifestyle. Like choose to make it something you live by, and it'll have an enduring property that. It won't just make a good living. It'll make you a great life, kind of thing.
With your kiddos, like what's Bella and Isaiah think of you when you're out on the road? They're seeing dad on TV. They're seeing all these things. Like what's some of their feedback?
I think they're still kind of young with it. They do acknowledge it, right? But I think the thing I love most is just being able to come home with them. And something that's helped me a ton is I started realizing when I would come home that, my daughter, she would feel my pant pocket from like my phone and, like technology, and we need it and we need to use it. And it's an amazing tool. But she started realizing, hey, like I'm more valuable. Like if I run away with this or this and that, maybe she didn't think that, but child psychology teaches you that at 10 months, kids can discern what we value. And so I got this box, my wife helped me find it, and it's nothing crazy. It's this plastic box you get off of Amazon, but it has this dial at the top, and basically whatever you put inside, you can press start and it'll lock it in the box till the time elapses. And so it was just something that, because I realized, part of being all in is being all there. It's being fully committed. We love to, multitasking is great, but there's something really powerful when someone's looking you in the eye when you're in a conversation with them at a party and they're not looking over your shoulders to see if there's someone else to talk to. Right. That we hate that feeling. And so I started realizing, hey, when I come home, like, let me be all there, and so sometimes I would take the phone and put it in the box. And I loved when the kids were watching because it was like, for the next, however long I would set it to, sometimes it'd just be 20 minutes at a time. Hey, it's Lego time.
Have they been to any events with you?
Not yet. But I want to take my daughter this fall. Yeah. I want to take my daughter this fall. Was just waiting for like, some of the benchmarks, we'll put it that way.
I've been in this industry for a little over 20 years, but I've had our company for almost 11. And so our boys have seen really the growth of it. But a lot of the organizations that we work with a lot of nonprofits as well as our corporate side. And with our nonprofits, they've had the opportunity to flip pancakes and volunteer and serve burgers to homeless shelters. And they've been a part of all these things. But I clearly remember Calvin at school, he was like star of the week. And he's our youngest. And I remember him standing in front of the room and introducing, you've got different people in there, business bankers, all these things. And I remember him standing up and saying, my mom plans parties and she helps people. And I will always remember those things. But I feel like they, just like what you said, they do from seeing and they do from watching. And they're seeing all these things. And for me, while I may be on the road, just like you, traveling, when I'm at home, that time is so sacred and so precious. And because they're mimicking all those things. And I want to leave a legacy for them to see like all of the lives that we're also a part of impacting and all the millions of dollars that we're raising through these nonprofits. And by having them at these events, but also seeing all the good work that we are doing is hopefully allowing them to see like, gosh, she is all in for this and she is a part of this and I can do that too. Yeah. So why I ask about your kiddos, I think they're younger and they're at a fun age. And I think when they get to be even in the teenage side, which you already know because you've taught ninth grade. I have a ninth grader now. Sometimes I don't know if they're listening, right? Like you're just going to keep talking and talking. But for me, I want to be all in for them. And I'm not 100% perfect and I'm sure you're not either. And it's just trying to find those moments where we can relate to them so we can be all in because what happens at home is also, you said it exactly before, it's exuded out in the community. It's exuded out beyond the basketball court, football field, whatever. So we try to be that same person at home as what we are now. And honestly, I've said it to people, I'm like, this is how I am. Like, I'm just like this day in and day out. And if you don't like it, then it just is what it is. But I try to show them that same thing at home as well.
And that's so powerful. I think what comes to mind is there's a great book by John Tyson called The Intentional Father. And he has this great excerpt. It's from Springsteen's book. And he basically talks about how Springsteen didn't have the best, upbringing. But when Springsteen had his first kid, he said his dad visited him in California. And he said that they're like, crazy Springsteen stuff, but like having beers for breakfast. And he said his dad like basically said, "Hey, I know growing up, Bruce, like I wasn't the best to you." And he said in that moment, he didn't know if his dad was apologizing or trying to say sorry or trying to start a new page. And there's this great quote by Springsteen in it where he says, I started to realize that, as parents, we can become two things, either ghosts or ancestors.
Yeah, interesting.
And he's like, ghosts haunt you and they stick with you and it feels like you can't shake them and their voices are in your head. But he's like, ancestors give you purpose. They give you a sense of legacy. They give you a sense of, I do this because there's something greater than myself. And my mom taught it me. My dad taught it me that I'm not the only thing in the universe and my purpose is bigger than just my own comfort. And, I just love the quote, because we have that opportunity in leadership, but also as parents, are we going to be ghosts or ancestors? And I want to be, and just like you're saying, we're doing the small things to be ancestors instead of just being those haunting voices where they look back on us, 20, 30 years and be like, yeah, all right. Like we want them to remember those, like you said, that pancake breakfast or those moments where it's like, no, they showed me how to be a great man. They showed me how to be a great woman. And it started young.
Wow. I need to look that up.
Intentional Father by John Tyson. Yeah.
I'm sure a mother could read it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. No, I think basically he should have called it Intentional Parent. I know, but I know he's coming out with one for his daughter who he's raising. But it's just a great premise and a great reminder of what we do. Yeah.
What is next for you? So you've with your organization, with life, with On the Road. I mean, the Hope and Future is an incredible part of your life and what you've helped build there. Like what's new? I mean, that is a pretty loaded question for you because you're involved with so many pieces, but I feel like you're leaving this lasting impression on all these individuals. Like what is next? What's big for you?
It has been trying to, not perfectly, but trying to have an absolute yes to honestly whatever God opens up in my life. Like an absolute yes, not a held back of like, well, if it makes sense or I think I've always, not perfectly, but I've always tried to be like, hey, okay, we're here. How can we serve? Hey, okay, how can we serve? And I think, there's some things that I was doing when I was 28, 29, running around in different places that I think are being a little bit converted or steered, in order to be that father. That's not a ghost, right? Kind of thing. Like just because we provide doesn't mean we're present. And so I think I don't want to get in the guise of like, hey, well, I'm providing. No, I think with God's help, we can do both. And that takes discipline and that takes maybe saying no. Sometimes I'm learning to say no a little bit more. I'm starting was blessed working with Jostens, the yearbook and the class ring company. They've been a really awesome organization. So actually just filming a series of videos that they'll play as part of their Renaissance curriculum in a couple of thousand high schools across the nation. For me, it's a blessing because at the end of the day, I want to be able to help and encourage others and just share some of the experiences I've had. And, trying to get to, I remember when I ran the New York City Marathon while dribbling a basketball, long story short, for an orphanage in South Africa. On my sneaker, I wrote 361 because 361 is the number of middle schools in New Jersey. And I was like, I want to get to every single middle school. And, I've been to a lot. And a bunch, and I'm so thankful for that. And I continue loving to going to high schools and middle schools, doing assemblies. That's why I'm in Colorado Springs for a school today. But I started realizing if there's a way I can reach them, without having to sometimes physically be there. Like that's why it's such a blessing getting to be on this podcast or different things to be able to share the encouragement, but at the same time, sometimes being able to be present a little bit more at home.
I feel like there is either a book or a documentary or some mini series or a Netflix or something about for you. I think you are destined for great things. God knows that path. And I think you keep the promise to yourself and to the people, and it will happen. I truly feel like, yeah, you are doing great things. And I'm proud of you. I get goosebumps hearing you talk, but I think the impact is beyond you. And you know that. And it's incredible to watch and to be a part of. So thank you. Thank you for joining us.
No, it's been a privilege. Thank you so much for all the amazing work that you guys are doing. And like I said, it was a privilege getting to work with you guys over in South Dakota. So thanks so much.
Well, for those that are watching, be sure to tune back in every other Thursday. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on YouTube. Until then, we'll chat with you soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncorked and Unscripted. Make sure to follow and rate this podcast wherever you're watching or listening. Stay connected with us by following us on social media at Uncorked Unscripted on Instagram and Facebook, and at Uncork Unscript on Twitter and TikTok. And if you really enjoyed this episode, do us a huge favor and send it to a friend. See you soon. Bye.